Hello and welcome back. Well, for some reason, Vladimir Putin forgot that many of the rockets and drones that were made during the Soviet era were made in Ukraine, in fact, up by Kharkiv. And those Ukrainians are some pretty crafty people. From the Daily Express, Vladimir Putin dealt further blow as drone attack destroys another airbase. Ukrainian drones hit 2 Russian airbases on Monday, Russia's defense minister said, while Ukrainian officials hinted at a capability to strike deeper within Russian territory, and Moscow launched a major barrage of missiles at Ukrainian cities. The defense ministry said 3 Russian servicemen were killed and 4 were wounded in attacks by Soviet-era drones at 2 bases, one in Ryazan, southeast of Moscow, and one in Russia's Saratov region. Engel's 2 Air Base in Saratov, which is a hub for Russia's fleet of strategic bombers, has been used to launch raids and missile strikes on Ukraine. Russia has used the long-range aircraft stationed at the base to fire cruise missiles at Ukraine, analysts say. There's no immediate claim of responsibility for the explosions, and Ukrainian officials on Monday made only oblique references to the explosions at the Russian air bases, as they have with past strikes inside Russia. Advisor to Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, Mikhailo Podolyak, said, "If something is launched into another country's airspace, sooner or later, unknown flying objects will return to departure point." Ukraine hasn't formally acknowledged past strikes inside Russian borders, choosing to maintain a cloud of ambiguity around such attacks. There's no evidence that any U.S.-provided weaponry was used in the attack. In fact, U.S. officials told the Wall Street Journal that the Pentagon has modified the HIMARS launchers so they can't fire long-range missiles, showing the length the Biden administration has gone to balance its support for Ukrainian forces against the risk of escalation with Moscow. From Forbes, Ukraine pulled ex-Soviet recon drone out of storage, added bombs, and sent them hurtling toward Russia. The drones that Ukrainian forces used to strike 2 Russian bomber bases 300 miles inside of Russia on Monday weren't the satellite-controlled missile arms Bayraktar TB2s that Ukraine bought from Turkey. No, they were reportedly Tupolev Tu-141 ex-Soviet antiques that last saw frontline service in the 1980s, flying photo reconnaissance missions for the Soviet Air Force. The jet-propelled Tu-141s weren't very sophisticated by 1980 standards and are even less sophisticated today. But it's simple, speedy, and big enough to haul a warhead weighing hundreds of pounds, making it more powerful than the TB2 with its 49-pound missiles. And the Tu-141 works, so it should come as no surprise Ukrainians are sending their Tu-141s on one-way missions to blow up Russian bombers. Tu-141 first flew in 1974. Tupolev built 142 copies of the 47-foot-long ramp-launched drone at its factory in Kharkiv in eastern Ukraine. The type served until 1989. It's hard to say how many Tu-141s and Tu-143 Ukraine has left. If any remain, expect more deep strikes targeting Russian bomber bases or other strategic targets. From the Daily Beast. Second day of drone attacks means invasion of Ukraine has now brought war to Russia. On Monday, deadly twin strikes at the Engels 2 airfield and the Diaghilevo military base less than 150 miles from Moscow. The strike Tuesday hit an oil storage tank in Kursk, not far from the Ukrainian border, setting off a spectacular explosion sure to rattle Russians who've been brainwashed to believe the war would never hit home. Rather than claiming victory, Oleksiy Reznikov, Ukraine's defense minister, repeated an old joke. Very often Russians smoke in places where it's forbidden to smoke, he said. From the Daily Express, Russia fears Moscow is under attack as Ukraine strikes Putin's airfield. The Russian Ministry of Defense claimed that the drones had all been intercepted, but debris from the collisions had fallen on airfield and caused explosion. 3 Russian soldiers have been killed by the strikes while 4 others were injured, they added. 2 attacks caused panic among Russian military bloggers, with one of the most read outlets on Telegram claiming Ukrainian forces had crossed into Russian territory and, quote, had already reached the banks of the Volga, which is a river that flows the horizontal length of Russia near Moscow. And the borders of Ukraine are nowhere near the Volga River, so that's crazy. Military blogger Redovkova wrote, "With a high degree of probability, the drone worked from our territory, which means that the enemy's DRGs have already reached the banks of the Volga." Again, they're nowhere near the Volga River. "If a drone came from Ukraine, then our enemy already has the technology with a range of 1,000 kilometers, which means Moscow is under attack." Well, yes, they have the ability. They've proven that. But I think they also have the good sense to know that attacking a civilian target target is, one, going to cost them a huge amount of international support and will increase the popularity of the invasion with the Russian people, where independent polling has shown that almost 2/3 of the Russians don't feel like they want to be involved in this anymore. I think Putin underestimated the Ukrainians in more than one way. He thought they were dumb, stupid, they didn't have any friends. Well, they got plenty of friends, that's been proven, and that he had all the aces. Now, there have been a couple of the Tu-141s that have been shot down. There was one that went off course and landed in Croatia, but nobody was hurt. The photos from the air bases before and after, especially the Diagalivo military base, showed, the day before the strike, all kinds of jets. Day after the strike, they'd all been dispersed to other airfields. While that doesn't sound like a big thing, because they do have the range to reach Ukraine from pretty much anywhere they're going to be dispersed to, it makes the job of the Russian Air Force that much harder, because, you don't really want to fly those bombs around, those cruise missiles. You might launch some of the planes off with some to take to their new airfield, but that's always a risk that, an accident on landing causes far more damage than it normally would have, because you're carrying live ordnance when you land. But it means putting it on trucks, getting it on trains, getting it to the new airfields. That all takes time, and then you have to split up your supply of cruise missiles and such so that they are where the bombers are, and if bomber breaks down for some reason, you have missiles there you can't use, and then you have to load them up, take them to where you have bombers that can use them. It makes a logistical nightmare for the Russians, which I feel is probably half of the plan with these Tu-141 drones. Even with a 300-pound warhead, they can only produce a limited amount of damage at an airfield. So it took out some bombers, yeah, but the big thing is it made a logistical nightmare for the Russians that is on top of the logistical nightmare they already have with trying to supply the troops on the ground in Ukraine. And as long as the Ukrainians keep striking only at military bases, it's going to make the war less and less popular with the Russian people, because they're getting the information that we all get. There's ways around internet firewalls and all that good stuff they use to try to control the flow of information in Russia. They know that civilian targets are being hit by the Russian forces, and as long as the Ukrainians only hit military targets, that's going to be a real opinion changer. And I think Vladimir Putin absolutely deserves it, and I love it. I'm going to get off here, and y'all have a good day. Remember the whole thing about like, subscribe, comment. Please comment. I want to hear what you think, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye.